The fluorescent lights in Dr. Harrison's waiting room cast a harsh clinical glow over the worn vinyl chairs and outdated magazines scattered across the glass coffee table. Maya Rodriguez sat in the corner, her dark eyes fixed on the floor tiles, counting the small cracks in the linoleum as a way to keep her mind occupied. The familiar weight of anxiety pressed against her chest, making each breath feel deliberate and measured. At 17, Maya had learned to make herself invisible. She wore an oversized hoodie that swallowed her small frame. The hood pulled up despite the warmth of the September afternoon in Phoenix, Arizona. Her long black hair fell like a curtain across half her face, a carefully constructed barrier between herself and the world. The bruise on her left temple had faded to a sickly yellow-green, but she still felt exposed, vulnerable in this sterile environment where there was nowhere to hide. "Maya Rodriguez?" The receptionist's voice cut through the quiet murmur of the waiting room. Maya's head snapped up, her body automatically tensing at the sound of her name. She nodded and stood, her movements careful and deliberate, as if any sudden motion might shatter the fragile calm she'd built around herself. Dr. James Harrison emerged from the back hallway, his white coat pristine and his smile professionally warm. At 52, he was a respected ophthalmologist in the community, known for his gentle bedside manner and his work with underserved populations. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, and his wire-rimmed glasses gave him an air of scholarly authority. He had built his practice on trust, on being the doctor who listened, who cared about more than just the medical condition in front of him. "Good afternoon, Maya," he said, extending his hand. Maya hesitated for a moment before shaking it, her grip brief and light. "I'm Dr. Harrison. I understand you've been having some vision problems?" Maya's voice was barely above a whisper when she replied, "Yes, sir. I've been getting headaches and sometimes things look blurry." "Doctor." Harrison noticed the way she kept her head tilted slightly, how her eyes darted around the room without ever quite meeting his gaze. In his 25 years of practice, he'd learned to read the subtle signs of trauma, the way people carried their pain in their posture, in their voice, in the space they claimed for themselves in the world. "Well, let's take a look and see what we can do to help," he said gently. "Follow me." The examination room was small but well-equipped. The familiar smell of antiseptic and the soft hum of medical equipment created an atmosphere that was both sterile and somehow comforting. Maya settled into the examination chair, her hands gripping the armrests as Dr. Harrison adjusted the height and angle to get the best view of her eyes. "I'm going to dim the lights now," he explained, his voice calm and reassuring. "Then I'll use this light to look at your eyes. It might be a little bright, but it shouldn't hurt." Maya nodded, her jaw clenched tight. As the room darkened, she felt her heart rate increase. Darkness had never been her friend. It was in the darkness that the worst things happened, when the footsteps approached her bedroom door, when the whispered threats were made, when she learned that screaming wouldn't save her. Dr. Harrison positioned the ophthalmoscope and leaned forward, the bright beam of light illuminating Maya's right eye. She remained perfectly still, her breathing shallow and controlled. Everything seemed routine until he moved to examine her left eye. The moment the light hit her left eye, Maya's entire body jerked backward, a sharp intake of breath escaping her lips. Her hands flew up instinctively, as if to protect herself from an incoming blow. The movement was so sudden, so filled with raw terror, that Dr. Harrison immediately pulled back. "I'm sorry," Maya whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay," Dr. Harrison said softly, setting down the ophthalmoscope. "Take your time. There's no rush." But something in that flinch, in the way her body had recoiled, had triggered an alarm in Dr. Harrison's mind. It wasn't just a normal reaction to the bright light. It was the response of someone who had learned to expect pain, who had been conditioned to protect themselves from harm. "Maya," he said carefully, "I'm going to adjust the light intensity. Make it a little softer. Would that be okay?" She nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry, Dr. Harrison. I don't know why I did that." "You don't need to apologize," he assured her. "Sometimes our bodies react before our minds catch up." He dimmed the ophthalmoscope's light and approached again, this time more slowly. Maya forced herself to remain still, her knuckles white as she gripped the chair. When the gentler light touched her left eye, she managed not to flinch, but Dr. Harrison could see the tension in every line of her body. What he saw when he looked into her eye made his blood run cold. The retina showed clear signs of trauma, not recent, but not old either. There were small hemorrhages, areas where blood vessels had burst under pressure. The pattern was distinctive, one he'd seen before in cases of severe head trauma, but what made his stomach drop was the systematic nature of it. This wasn't from a single accident or fall. This was from repeated, deliberate impact. Dr. Harrison's hands remained steady as he continued the examination, but his mind was racing. He'd seen similar injuries in victims of domestic violence, in children who had been shaken or struck repeatedly. The damage was subtle enough that it might not affect Maya's vision significantly, but it was there, written in the delicate tissues of her eye like a secret message that only someone with his training could read. "How long have you been having headaches, Maya?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "A few months," she replied, "maybe longer, they come and go." "And the blurry vision?" "Sometimes. Usually when I'm really tired or stressed." Dr. Harrison nodded, making notes on his chart. Each question felt like walking through a minefield. He needed information, but he could sense that Maya was like a bird ready to take flight at the first sign of danger. "Have you had any head injuries recently? Falls, car accidents, anything like that?" Maya's pause was so long that Dr. Harrison looked up from his chart. She was staring at her hands, her fingers twisted together in her lap. "I'm clumsy," she said finally. "I fall down the stairs sometimes, or walk into doors." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken truth. Dr. Harrison had heard these explanations before, the careful lies that victims told to protect themselves and their abusers. The practiced way she delivered the response told him everything he needed to know about how often she'd been asked to explain her injuries. "Maya," he said gently, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to know that whatever you tell me, I'm here to help. Are you safe at home?" The question hit Maya like a physical blow. Her entire body went rigid and her eyes finally met his. In them, Dr. Harrison saw terror but also something else. A desperate hope that someone might finally see her, really see her, and understand what was happening. She started, then stopped. Her voice was barely audible when she spoke again. I can't talk about that." Dr. Harrison leaned back in his chair, giving her space. He'd been trained in how to handle these situations, but the reality was always more complex than any textbook could prepare him for. Maya was a minor, which meant certain protocols had to be followed, but he could see that pushing too hard right now might cause her to shut down completely. "Okay," he said softly. "We don't have to talk about anything you're not ready to discuss, but I want you to know that if you ever need help, if you ever feel unsafe, there are people who can help you. Do you understand?" Maya nodded, but her eyes had gone flat, empty. Dr. Harrison recognized the look. It was the way trauma victims learn to protect themselves, by simply disappearing inside their own minds. "I'm going to finish your examination now," he said. "The light will be very gentle." As he completed the rest of the eye exam, Dr. Harrison's mind was working furiously. The evidence was clear. Maya was being abused, and from the pattern of injuries, it had been going on for some time. But evidence wasn't enough. He needed Maya to trust him, to open up, to let him help her. And he needed to figure out how to navigate the complex web of mandatory reporting laws, family dynamics, and the very real possibility that intervening might actually make things worse for her. When he finished the examination, Dr. Harrison turned the lights back up and made some final notes on Maya's chart. She sat quietly in the chair, her hood back up, her face once again hidden behind the curtain of her hair. "Your vision is actually quite good," he told her. "The headaches are likely related to stress and possibly some mild eye strain. I'm going to prescribe some glasses for you to wear when you're reading or doing close work. That should help with the headaches." Maya nodded, accepting the prescription slip he handed her. "Thank you, Dr. Harrison." "Maya," he said, and she looked up at him. "I want you to have my card. If you ever need anything at all, you can call me, day or night." She took the business card, her fingers brushing against his. For just a moment he saw the mask slip, saw the frightened child behind the carefully constructed walls. "Thank you," she whispered. As Maya left the examination room, Dr. Harrison remained seated, staring at her chart. The weight of what he'd discovered pressed down on him like a physical burden. He'd seen the evidence of abuse written in the delicate tissues of her eye, but he'd also seen something else, a strength that had allowed her to survive whatever hell she was living in. The question now was what to do with that knowledge. The law required him to report suspected child abuse, but Maya was 17, almost an adult. She'd made it clear she wasn't ready to talk, wasn't ready to accept help. Forcing the issue could backfire catastrophically. Dr. Harrison picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number for Sarah Chen, a social worker he'd worked with on similar cases. Sarah was good at her job, compassionate but realistic about the complexities of abuse cases. "Sarah, it's James Harrison," he said when she answered. "I need to talk to you about a case, a 17-year-old girl. I think she's being abused, but the situation is complicated." "They always are," Sarah replied. "Can you come by my office tomorrow? We can discuss your options." "I'll be there," Dr. Harrison said. After hanging up, he sat in the quiet examination room for a long time, thinking about Maya Rodriguez and the weight of the secret she carried. He thought about the careful way she moved, the practiced explanations for her injuries, the terror in her eyes when he'd asked if she was safe. In the parking lot outside, Maya sat in her stepfather's pickup truck, her hands shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. She'd gotten her license 6 months ago, but Rick only let her drive when it was convenient for him, when he needed her to run errands or pick up his prescriptions. Today, he'd been too drunk to drive her to the appointment himself. She looked at Dr. Harrison's business card, reading his name over and over. For a moment in that examination room, she'd almost believed that someone might actually be able to help her. But then reality had crashed back in. She was 17, financially dependent on her mother and stepfather, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Speaking up would only make things worse. Maya started the truck and pulled out of the parking lot, but she didn't throw away the business card. Instead, she tucked it into the small hidden pocket in her backpack, next to the $20 she'd been saving for months and the spare key to her bedroom door, the small tokens of hope that kept her going. Behind her, Dr. Harrison watched from his office window as the truck disappeared into traffic. He'd made a promise to himself long ago that he would use his position to help people, to make a difference in their lives. Now he was faced with the most challenging case of his career, a young woman who needed help but wasn't ready to accept it, a system that was designed to protect children but often failed them, and a community that preferred to look the other way rather than confront uncomfortable truths. The examination had revealed more than just the physical evidence of abuse. It had shown him the depth of Maya's suffering and the strength of her will to survive. It had also shown him that helping her would require more than just following protocol. It would require patience, wisdom, and a willingness to risk everything for someone who might not even thank him for it. As the sun set over Phoenix, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Dr. Harrison locked up his office and headed home to his own family. But Maya Rodriguez and the secret written in her eyes would haunt his thoughts, driving him toward a decision that would change both their lives forever. The first chapter of their story was complete, but the real test was just beginning. Dr. Harrison's home in the Ahwatukee foothills felt different that evening. The Spanish-style house with its terracotta roof and desert landscaping had always been his sanctuary, a place where he could leave the weight of his patients' problems at the door. But tonight, as he sat across from his wife Linda at their dining room table, Maya Rodriguez's face haunted every shadow. "You're quiet tonight," Linda observed, cutting into her grilled salmon. After 23 years of marriage, she could read her husband's moods like a familiar book. "Rough day at the office?" Dr. Harrison pushed his food around his plate, his appetite gone. "I had a patient today, a teenage girl. I think she's being hurt at home." Linda set down her fork, her expression immediately serious. As a former nurse, she understood the weight of these situations. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," he admitted. "She's 17, almost 18. She's not ready to talk about it, and I'm worried that if I push too hard, she'll disappear entirely." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Their daughter Emma, a sophomore at Arizona State University, bounded into the kitchen with the casual confidence of someone who had never known real fear. "Hey, Dad. Hey, Mom," she said, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "I'm heading to study group. Don't wait up." Dr. Harrison watched his daughter, healthy, safe, loved, and felt his chest tighten. Emma was only a year older than Maya, but they might as well have lived on different planets. Emma worried about midterms and sorority rush and whether Jake from her chemistry class would ask her out. Maya worried about surviving the night. "Drive carefully," Linda called as Emma headed for the door. "Always do," Emma replied cheerfully, and then she was gone, leaving behind the lingering scent of her vanilla perfume and the sound of her laughter. Dr. Harrison excused himself and went to his home office, a small room lined with medical journals and family photos. He pulled Maya's file from his briefcase and spread the contents across his desk. The clinical notes seemed inadequate to capture what he'd witnessed. The terror in her flinch, the practiced way she'd explained her clumsiness, the desperate hope in her eyes when he'd offered help. He opened his laptop and began researching Maya's background. It didn't take long to find information about her family. Her mother, Carmen Rodriguez, worked as a housekeeper for several wealthy families in Scottsdale. She'd married Rick Dalton 3 years ago, a construction worker with a history of DUI arrests and domestic disturbance calls. Maya's biological father had died in a car accident when she was 12. The more Dr. Harrison read, the clearer the picture became. Carmen had been struggling financially as a single mother when she met Rick. By all accounts, he'd seemed like a lifeline, a steady job, a willingness to provide for Maya and her mother. But the police reports told a different story. Neighbors had called about shouting matches, broken glass, Carmen showing up to work with unexplained bruises. Doctor. Harrison leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The pattern was depressingly familiar. A vulnerable woman, desperate to provide stability for her child, getting involved with a man who seemed like salvation, but turned out to be something else entirely. And Maya, caught in the middle, probably trying to protect her mother even as she became a victim herself. His phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen and felt his blood freeze. Dr. Harrison, this is Maya. Can I call you? Something happened. The message had been sent from an unknown number, probably a friend's phone or a burner phone she'd managed to get. Dr. Harrison immediately called the number back, his heart pounding. Hello? Maya's voice was barely audible, thick with tears. Maya, it's Dr. Harrison. Where are you? Are you safe? I'm at the Circle K on 32nd Street. I had to leave. Rick was really angry tonight. Mom's at work and he was drinking and... Her voice broke into sobs. Dr. Harrison was already reaching for his car keys. Stay where you are. I'm coming to get you. No, you can't. If he sees you, if he finds out I talked to someone... Maya, listen to me. You called me for a reason. Let me help you. The silence stretched for so long that Dr. Harrison thought she'd hung up. Finally, she spoke again, her voice small and defeated. I don't know what to do anymore. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I just kept quiet, if I just tried to stay out of his way. But tonight he said things about what he was going to do to me when Mom's not around, and I realized that it's never going to stop. It's only going to get worse. Dr. Harrison was in his car now, driving through the Phoenix night toward the convenience store. You were right to call me. You were brave to reach out. I don't feel brave, Maya whispered. I feel scared and stupid and trapped. You're not stupid, Maya. You're a survivor. Do you understand me? Everything you've done to protect yourself, to keep going, that takes incredible strength. When Dr. Harrison pulled into the Circle K parking lot, he spotted Maya immediately. She was sitting on the curb near the edge of the building, her knees drawn up to her chest, making herself as small as possible. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the store, he could see fresh bruises on her arms, and her lip was split and swollen. He parked and approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. Maya. She looked up, and Dr. Harrison felt his heart break at the sight of her face. Both eyes were blackened, and there were finger-shaped bruises on her throat. This wasn't the result of walking into a door or falling downstairs. This was the work of someone who had deliberately tried to hurt her. Oh, sweetheart, he said softly, kneeling down beside her. What did he do to you? He came home drunk, Maya said, her voice hollow. Started yelling about dinner not being ready, about the house being messy. I tried to clean up, but nothing I did was right. Then he grabbed me, said Mom was working late again, said it was time I learned to be grateful for everything he'd done for us. Dr. Harrison felt a rage building in his chest that threatened to overwhelm his professional composure. The clinical detachment that had served him well throughout his career crumbled in the face of Maya's pain. We need to get you to a hospital, he said. You need to be examined, and we need to document these injuries. No, Maya said immediately, panic creeping into her voice. I can't. If Mom finds out, if Rick finds out I went to the police, Maya, he could have killed you tonight. Look at your neck. He tried to strangle you. She touched her throat unconsciously, wincing at the contact. I know, but you don't understand. Mom depends on him. His paycheck, his insurance. If I cause problems, if he leaves because of me, we'll lose everything. Mom will lose everything. Doctor. Harrison sat down on the curb beside her, close enough to offer comfort but far enough away to respect her space. Your mother wouldn't want you to sacrifice yourself to protect her financial security. You don't know my mom, Maya said with a bitter laugh. She's been through so much. Dad's death, struggling to pay bills, working 3 jobs just to keep our apartment. When Rick came along, it was like she could breathe again. I can't be the reason she loses that. What about your breathing, Maya? What about your life? The question hung between them in the warm desert night. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the city. Traffic on the freeway. Sirens. The ordinary life of Phoenix continuing around them while Maya's world fell apart. I keep thinking I just have to make it to 18, Maya said finally. 7 more months. Then I can leave, get a job, maybe go to community college. Mom will be okay without me there to cause problems. Dr. Harrison felt his chest tighten. 7 months might as well be 7 years for someone in Maya's situation. 7 months of nights like this one, of violence escalating, of a young woman slowly being destroyed by someone who was supposed to protect her. Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has he ever touched you inappropriately? The silence that followed was answer enough. Maya wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slightly. He hasn't, not yet, she whispered. But tonight, the things he said, I think he's been waiting for the right moment when Mom's not around, when he's sure I won't tell. Dr. Harrison closed his eyes, fighting back the nausea that threatened to overwhelm him. The situation was even worse than he'd imagined. Maya wasn't just being physically abused. She was living under the constant threat of sexual assault. We have to do something, he said. We have to get you out of there. Where would I go? Maya asked. I don't have any family besides Mom. No money. Nowhere to run. Dr. Harrison's mind was racing, considering options. Foster care was a possibility, but Maya was almost 18, and the system was notoriously difficult to navigate. She could stay in a shelter, but those were often dangerous in their own ways, and they were meant to be temporary solutions. What if? He started, then stopped. What he was thinking was crazy, potentially career-ending, definitely complicated. But looking at Maya's battered face, at the defeat in her posture, he couldn't bring himself to care about the complications. What if you came home with me tonight? He said. Just for tonight, until we can figure out a more permanent solution. Maya stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. You can't be serious. I am serious. My wife is a former nurse. She'll understand. We have a guest room, and you'll be safe while we figure out what to do next. Dr. Harrison, I can't. People will talk. Your reputation, your practice. Let me worry about that, he said firmly. Right now, my only concern is keeping you alive. Maya was quiet for a long time, staring out at the traffic passing by on the street. Doctor, Harrison could see her weighing her options, trying to calculate the risks and benefits of trusting him. If I go with you, she said finally, Rick will know I'm gone. He'll call the police, report me as a runaway. Then we'll deal with that when it happens, Dr. Harrison replied. Maya, you called me tonight because some part of you knew you couldn't go back there. Trust that instinct. She nodded slowly, and Dr. Harrison felt a small spark of hope. It was a start, at least. Getting Maya to safety for one night wouldn't solve everything, but it would give them time to plan, time to figure out how to navigate the complex web of laws and social services that surrounded cases like hers. As they drove back to his house, Maya stared out the window at the lights of Phoenix stretching out below them. For the first time in months, she wasn't afraid of what the next few hours would bring. She wasn't safe. Not yet. Not completely. But she was no longer alone. Dr. Harrison glanced at her in the rearview mirror and made a silent promise. He would do everything in his power to make sure Maya Rodriguez never had to fear for her life again. It was a promise that would test every principle he'd built his career on, that would force him to confront the limitations of a system designed to help people like Maya, but often failing them instead. The second chapter of their story was ending, but the real battle was just beginning. In trying to save Maya, Dr. Harrison was about to discover just how far he was willing to go, and just how much he was willing to risk, for someone who had already lost everything. Linda Harrison was waiting in the kitchen when Dr. Harrison and Maya arrived at the house. She'd prepared a bag of ice and had the first aid kit spread across the counter, her nursing instincts taking over the moment her husband had called to explain the situation. When she saw Maya's face in the light of their entryway, her professional composure cracked. Oh my God, Linda whispered, her hand covering her mouth. James, we need to call the police. Now. No, Maya said immediately, panic flashing in her eyes. Please, Mrs. Harrison, I can't, not yet. Linda looked between her husband and the battered teenager, her maternal instincts warring with her knowledge of proper protocol. She'd seen abuse cases during her years as an ER nurse, had held the hands of women and children who'd been broken by people who claimed to love them, but she'd never brought one home. Okay, Linda said softly, approaching Maya slowly. Let's get you cleaned up first. We can talk about everything else later. For the next hour, Linda tended to Maya's injuries with gentle efficiency. The split lip would heal on its own, and the bruises, while dramatic, were mostly superficial. But the finger-shaped marks around Maya's throat told a different story, one that made Linda's hands shake as she documented each injury with her phone camera. These need to be reported, Linda told her husband quietly while Maya showered in their guest bathroom. James, if that man tried to strangle her— I know, Dr. Harrison replied, pacing their bedroom like a caged animal. But if we force this, if we call the police without her consent, we could lose her trust completely. She'll run, and next time she might not survive. And if we don't report it, and he kills her tomorrow night? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Dr. Harrison sat heavily on their bed, suddenly feeling every one of his 52 years. I've been thinking about this all evening, he said. Maya turns 18 in 7 months. If we can keep her safe until then, she can make her own decisions about pressing charges, about what she wants to do with her life. 7 months, James. That's a long time to hide a teenager. I know, but what's the alternative? Turn her over to Child Protective Services? You know what that system is like. She could end up in a group home, or worse, they could send her back to her mother with a safety plan that's worth less than the paper it's printed on. Linda understood her husband's frustration. They'd both seen how the system failed vulnerable children, how bureaucracy and underfunding created gaps that dangerous people could slip through. But harboring a minor without parental consent, even with the best intentions, was legally complicated at best. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the bedroom door. Maya stood in the hallway, swimming in one of Linda's old nursing scrubs, her dark hair still damp from the shower. The bruises looked even more stark against her clean skin. I heard voices, Maya said hesitantly. Are you going to call the police? Dr. Harrison exchanged a look with his wife before responding. We think you should consider it, Maya. What Rick did to you tonight. Attempted strangulation. It's a felony. He could go to prison. And what happens to my mom? Maya asked, her voice small but determined. He gets arrested. She loses her house, her insurance, everything. She'll blame me, and she'll be right to. I destroyed her life because I couldn't handle a few bruises. Maya, Linda said gently, those aren't just a few bruises. You could have died tonight. But I didn't, Maya replied, with the pragmatic acceptance of someone who'd learned to calculate survival in terms of days and hours rather than years. I got out, I called Dr. Harrison, and now I'm safe. For tonight, at least. Dr. Harrison felt his heart break at the matter-of-fact way she discussed her own near-death experience. Maya had been so thoroughly conditioned to minimize her own suffering that she couldn't see the magnitude of what had happened to her. What do you want to do? He asked. Maya was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. When she spoke, her voice was steady but tired. I want to go back. What? Linda gasped. I have to go back, Maya clarified. If I disappear, Rick will know I talked to someone. He'll take it out on Mom, and then he'll find me. But if I go back and act like nothing happened, like I just went for a walk to cool off, maybe things can go back to how they were. How they were was you getting beaten nearly to death, Dr. Harrison said, his voice sharper than he intended. Maya flinched at his tone, and he immediately regretted it. She was already so fragile, so convinced that she was the problem rather than the victim. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I didn't mean to raise my voice. But Maya, you can't go back there. Not after tonight. Then what? Maya asked. And for the first time, Dr. Harrison heard real anger in her voice. What's your plan, Dr. Harrison? I can't stay here forever. I can't afford to rent my own place. I don't have family who can take me in. So what exactly am I supposed to do? The question exposed the harsh reality that Dr. Harrison had been trying to avoid. Good intentions weren't enough to solve Maya's situation. She needed concrete solutions, housing, income, legal protection, and the systems designed to provide those things were inadequate at best, actively harmful at worst. I need to make some calls, Dr. Harrison said finally. There are people who might be able to help. Social workers, victim advocates, maybe some legal aid organizations. Maya nodded, but Dr. Harrison could see the skepticism in her eyes. She'd learned not to trust in solutions that sounded too good to be true. The next morning, Dr. Harrison canceled his appointments for the day and spent hours on the phone. He called Sarah Chen, the social worker he'd worked with before, and explained Maya's situation. "She's 17, James," Sarah said over the phone. "Technically still a minor. If she refuses to cooperate with an investigation, our hands are tied. We can't force her into protective custody without evidence of immediate danger." "What about the photos of her injuries? The attempted strangulation?" "Helpful, but not enough if she won't testify about how she got them. And even if she did, removing her from the home would require either her consent or a court order. Given that she's almost 18, most judges would be reluctant to disrupt her life for such a short period." Dr. Harrison felt his frustration mounting. "So we just do nothing? Wait for him to finish the job?" "I didn't say that," Sarah replied. "There are other options. Shelters, transitional housing programs. But James, you need to understand. Most of these programs have waiting lists, strict rules, limited resources. And if Maya isn't ready to permanently leave her home situation, she's likely to end up back where she started." After hanging up with Sarah, Dr. Harrison tried calling several domestic violence shelters. The responses were depressingly similar. Limited space, long waiting lists, programs designed for women with children rather than teenagers on their own. One intake coordinator was brutally honest about Maya's prospects. "Look, doctor, I'll be straight with you," she said. "A 17-year-old girl with no support system, no job skills, no money. She's exactly the kind of case that falls through the cracks. The shelters that could take her are overcrowded and underfunded. The transitional housing programs are designed for people who are ready to completely break ties with their abusers. If she's not there yet, emotionally or practically, she's going to struggle." By afternoon, Dr. Harrison felt like he was beating his head against a wall. Every call led to another dead end, another program that Maya didn't quite qualify for or that couldn't provide the comprehensive support she needed. The system that was supposed to protect vulnerable people like Maya seemed designed to fail them instead. He was sitting in his office staring at a list of crossed-out phone numbers when his receptionist knocked on the door. "Dr. Harrison, there's a police officer here to see you. He says it's about Maya Rodriguez." Dr. Harrison's blood ran cold. He walked to the waiting room to find a tall, heavy-set man in a Phoenix Police Department uniform. The officer's expression was professional but stern. "Dr. Harrison, I'm Officer Martinez. I need to ask you some questions about Maya Rodriguez. Her stepfather filed a missing person report this morning." "She's not missing," Dr. Harrison said carefully. "She's safe." "Where is she, sir?" Dr. Harrison hesitated. Legally, he was required to cooperate with the police investigation. But morally, he couldn't bring himself to send Maya back to the man who had tried to kill her. "She's with friends," he said finally. "Safe friends." Officer Martinez pulled out a small notebook. "Mr. Dalton is very concerned about Maya. Says she's been having problems lately. Acting out, getting into trouble at school. He's worried she might hurt herself." The lies came so easily, delivered with such apparent sincerity that Dr. Harrison felt sick. This was how Rick maintained control, by convincing everyone around him that Maya was the problem, that she was unstable, that any accusations she made were the product of a troubled mind. "Officer Martinez," Dr. Harrison said carefully, "I'm Maya's doctor. I examined her yesterday and I can tell you that she's not suicidal or mentally unstable. She's a victim of domestic violence." The officer's expression didn't change. "Do you have evidence of that, sir? Photos? Police reports? Hospital records?" "I have medical records showing injuries consistent with abuse. But nothing that definitively proves Mr. Dalton was responsible, Doctor?" Harrison's jaw clenched. "Maya told me he was responsible. Hearsay, sir. And given that Maya is a minor who's been reported missing by her legal guardian, I'm going to need you to tell me where she is." The moment felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Dr. Harrison could comply with the officer's request, return Maya to Rick's custody, and hope that the system would eventually protect her. Or he could refuse, potentially face charges himself and continue trying to find a real solution. "I need to make a phone call first," Dr. Harrison said. "Sir, this isn't a negotiation. If you know where Maya Rodriguez is, you need to tell me now." Dr. Harrison thought about Maya's face the night before, about the terror in her eyes and the bruises around her throat. He thought about Rick Dalton, probably sitting at home right now, confident that the system would deliver Maya back to him like a piece of lost property. "Officer Martinez," Dr. Harrison said quietly, "I understand you're just doing your job, but that girl nearly died last night. If I tell you where she is and you return her to that house, you'll be signing her death warrant. That's a very serious accusation, Dr. Harrison. Do you want to file a formal complaint? Would it matter if I did?" Officer Martinez closed his notebook and studied Dr. Harrison's face. "Look, doctor, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen a lot of domestic violence cases and I know how complicated they can be. But I've also seen what happens when well-meaning people take the law into their own hands. It usually doesn't end well for anyone involved. And what happens when the law fails to protect the people who need it most? Then we try to do better next time," Officer Martinez said. "But we still have to follow procedure. Maya Rodriguez is a minor. Her legal guardian has reported her missing. If you know where she is, you need to tell me." Dr. Harrison realized that he was at a crossroads that would define not just Maya's future, but his own. Every principle he'd built his life on, helping people, following the rules, trusting in the system, was being tested. He could feel the weight of Officer Martinez's expectation, the legal obligation to cooperate, the professional responsibility to stay within appropriate boundaries. But he could also feel the weight of Maya's trust, the promise he'd made to keep her safe, the certainty that returning her to Rick's custody would be a betrayal of everything he claimed to believe in. "I can't do that, Doctor," Harrison said finally. Officer Martinez sighed and reached for his handcuffs. "James Harrison, you're under arrest for interfering with a police investigation and harboring a minor." As the metal clicked around his wrists, Dr. Harrison felt a strange sense of peace. He'd made his choice, and whatever consequences followed, at least he'd know he'd tried to protect someone who had no one else to protect her. But as Officer Martinez led him from his office, Dr. Harrison couldn't shake the fear that his arrest might have made Maya's situation worse, not better. The system he'd hoped to circumvent was now fully engaged, and Maya was about to learn that sometimes the people who try to help you can end up being the ones who hurt you most. In trying to save Maya Rodriguez, Dr. Harrison had set in motion a chain of events that would force both of them to confront the darkest truths about justice, mercy, and the price of doing what's right in a world that often punishes virtue and rewards cruelty. The third chapter was ending, but the real reckoning was just beginning. The Maricopa County Jail was a concrete testament to human failure, its beige walls and fluorescent lighting creating an atmosphere of institutional despair. Dr. Harrison sat in the holding cell, still wearing his wrinkled dress shirt and tie from the day before, surrounded by the smell of disinfectant and unwashed bodies. 24 hours had passed since his arrest, and the weight of his decision pressed down on him like a physical burden. His attorney, David Brennan, sat across from him in the sterile interview room, legal documents spread across the metal table between them. Brennan was a friend from medical school who had switched to law, and his expression was a mixture of professional concern and personal disappointment. "James, they're offering you a deal," Brennan said, sliding a document across the table. "Plead guilty to harboring a minor, pay a fine, do community service. In exchange, they'll drop the interference charges and you can keep your medical license." Dr. Harrison stared at the plea agreement without really seeing it. "What about Maya?" "She's back with her family. Child Protective Services did a home visit yesterday. Found no evidence of abuse. Case closed." The words hit Dr. Harrison like a physical blow. "That's impossible. I saw her injuries. I documented everything." "Rick Dalton had an explanation for everything," Brennan said grimly. "Maya fell down the stairs. She's always been clumsy, according to him, prone to making up stories for attention." He seemed genuinely concerned about her mental health. Dr. Harrison's hands clenched into fists. And they believed him? "James, you have to understand how this looks from the outside. A respected doctor becomes obsessed with a teenage patient, convinces her that her stepfather is abusing her, then hides her from her family. Without Maya corroborating your story, she was afraid, traumatized. Of course, she wouldn't talk to the investigators. Or," Brennan said carefully, "she was telling the truth when she said she fell down the stairs, and you misinterpreted what you saw." The suggestion hung in the air between them like a toxic cloud. Dr. Harrison felt the ground shifting beneath his feet, the certainty he'd felt about Maya's situation beginning to crack under the weight of official skepticism. "You don't believe me either," Dr. Harrison said quietly. Brennan leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. James, I've known you for 30 years. You're a good man, a dedicated doctor. But sometimes good people make mistakes, especially when they're trying to help. This isn't a mistake, David. That girl is being systematically abused, and everyone is just looking the other way. Then prove it, Brennan challenged. Give me something concrete. Phone records, witnesses, medical evidence that can't be explained away. Dr. Harrison opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The truth was, everything he had was circumstantial. The eye injuries could have been from falls. The bruises could have been from clumsiness. Even the finger marks on Maya's throat could be explained away by someone determined to disbelieve. Take the deal, James, Brennan said softly. Go home to your family. Get back to your practice. Let the professionals handle Maya's case. That afternoon, Dr. Harrison was released on his own recognizance. Linda picked him up from the jail, her face a mask of controlled emotion. They drove home in silence, the desert landscape passing by in a blur of brown and green. The hospital called, Linda said finally as they pulled into their driveway. They're conducting a review of your privileges. The medical board wants to interview you next week. Dr. Harrison nodded, unsurprised. His arrest had made the local news, prominent Phoenix doctor arrested for harboring teen, and the medical community was nothing if not sensitive to scandal. Emma's been calling all day, Linda continued. She's upset, confused. She doesn't understand how her father could be involved in something like this. The weight of what his decision had cost his family began to settle on Dr. Harrison's shoulders. His daughter's faith in him, his wife's trust, his professional reputation, all of it damaged, possibly irreparably, for a girl who had already returned to the very situation he'd tried to save her from. That evening, Dr. Harrison sat in his home office, staring at the business card that had started everything. On impulse, he called the number Maya had texted from 2 nights ago. It rang once before going to a disconnected message. He tried her home number, listed in her patient file. Hello? Carmen Rodriguez's voice was tired, wary. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Dr. Harrison, Maya's eye doctor. I was wondering how she's doing. The silence stretched so long that Dr. Harrison wondered if she'd hung up. When Carmen finally spoke, her voice was cold. You stay away from my daughter, doctor. You've caused enough trouble for our family. Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm only trying to help. Help? Carmen's voice rose. You had my daughter convinced that Rick was trying to hurt her. You filled her head with lies, made her afraid of the man who's been nothing but good to us. Maya told me what you said to her, how you tried to turn her against her family. Dr. Harrison felt the world tilting around him. That's not what happened. Maya came to me for help. She was injured. Maya is clumsy. She always has been. But you made her think every bump and bruise was something sinister. You almost destroyed our family with your accusations. The line went dead, leaving Dr. Harrison staring at the phone in disbelief. Either Carmen Rodriguez was the most accomplished liar he'd ever encountered, or Maya had somehow managed to convince everyone, including her own mother, that his intervention had been unwanted and inappropriate. Dr. Harrison drove to Maya's neighborhood that night, parking across the street from the small ranch house where she lived. The windows glowed warmly in the darkness, and through the kitchen window he could see the 3 of them sitting around the dinner table like a normal family. Rick was gesturing as he told some story. Carmen was laughing and Maya was sitting quietly, her face turned away from the window. For a moment, Dr. Harrison wondered if he'd been wrong about everything. Maybe Maya really was just a clumsy teenager. Maybe Rick really was a devoted stepfather. Maybe the desperate girl who had called him from a convenience store had been a figment of his own imagination, a projection of his need to be needed. But then Maya turned toward the window, and even from across the street, Dr. Harrison could see the fresh bruises on her face. His phone buzzed with a text message, unknown number again. I saw your car, you need to leave, now. Dr. Harrison typed back quickly. Maya, are you okay? I'm fine, but if Rick sees you here, it will be bad for everyone. Please go. I want to help you. You tried. It didn't work. Just, please leave me alone. Dr. Harrison sat in his car for another 10 minutes watching the house before finally driving away. As he turned the corner, he saw Rick Dalton step out onto the front porch, his silhouette dark against the light spilling from the doorway. Even from a distance, Dr. Harrison could feel the man's malevolent presence, the predatory stillness of someone who had successfully defended his territory. The medical board hearing was held in a sterile conference room downtown, with 5 doctors seated behind a long table like judges at a trial. Dr. Harrison sat across from them, flanked by his attorney and a representative from the hospital's legal department. Dr. Margaret Chen, the board chair, read from a thick file in front of her. Dr. Harrison, you've been practicing medicine in Arizona for 25 years with an exemplary record. No malpractice suits, no ethical violations, numerous commendations from patients and colleagues, which makes your recent behavior all the more concerning. I was trying to help a patient who I believed was in danger, Dr. Harrison said, by removing her from her home without parental consent, by involving yourself in her personal life beyond the scope of your medical relationship. Sometimes the scope of medical care has to extend beyond what's written in textbooks, Dr. Harrison replied. When you see a patient being systematically abused, did you see abuse, doctor? Dr. Chen interrupted. Or did you see injuries that you interpreted as abuse? The question cut to the heart of everything Dr. Harrison had been questioning about himself. Had he really seen evidence of systematic abuse? Or had he allowed his emotions to cloud his professional judgment? I saw a terrified 17-year-old girl with injuries consistent with repeated physical trauma, he said finally. I saw someone who needed help. And in trying to provide that help, you may have caused more harm than good, said Dr. Robert Kim, another board member. The family has filed a complaint alleging that you created psychological trauma for their daughter by convincing her she was being abused when she wasn't. Dr. Harrison felt the walls closing in around him. The very people he'd tried to help were now painting him as the villain, and without Maya's cooperation, he had no way to prove otherwise. We're not suspending your license, Dr. Chen said finally, but you'll be required to complete additional training in professional boundaries and patient relationships. And Dr. Harrison, in the future, if you suspect abuse, you follow proper channels. You report it to the authorities and let them handle the investigation. You don't take matters into your own hands. Walking out of the hearing, Dr. Harrison felt hollow, defeated. He'd devoted his life to helping people, and now he was being told that his attempt to save Maya Rodriguez had been an unprofessional overreach that had caused more harm than good. 3 months later, Dr. Harrison was back in his office, seeing patients and trying to rebuild his practice. The scandal had died down, replaced by newer controversies and fresher gossip. His relationship with Linda had survived, though it had been strained by the stress and uncertainty. Emma had eventually forgiven him, though she still asked pointed questions about what had really happened with Maya Rodriguez. Maya herself had become a ghost in his memory, a reminder of the dangers of caring too much, of stepping outside the carefully defined boundaries of professional medicine. He'd heard through Sarah Chen that Maya had graduated from high school and was working at a fast food restaurant, still living with her mother and stepfather. Dr. Harrison was reviewing patient charts when his receptionist knocked on his office door. Doctor, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. Dr. Harrison looked up to see Maya Rodriguez standing in his doorway. She was 18 now, legally an adult, but she looked younger and older at the same time. Her face was thinner, her eyes harder, and she carried herself with the careful posture of someone who had learned to expect pain. Maya, he said, standing up. How are you? I wanted to thank you, she said, closing the door behind her, and to apologize. You don't need to apologize for anything. Maya sat down in the chair across from his desk, the same chair she'd occupied 9 months ago when this had all started. Yes, I do. I let them convince everyone that you were wrong about Rick. I told the social workers and the police that you misunderstood what happened to me. Why? Because I was scared? Because I thought if I just kept quiet, things would eventually get better. Because I was stupid and naive and thought I could handle it on my own. Dr. Harrison felt his chest tighten. Maya, what happened? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with a pain so deep it took his breath away. He raped me, she said simply. 2 weeks after I turned 18, Mom was working a double shift and he came into my room. He said it was time I showed some gratitude for everything he'd done for our family. The words hit Dr. Harrison like physical blows. He felt rage and grief and helplessness warring in his chest. Did you report it? I tried to, but I'm 18 now, so it's not child abuse anymore. It's just domestic violence. And when I told the police, Rick said I was lying, making things up because I was angry that he'd been trying to get me to contribute more to household expenses. He said I'd been trying to seduce him, and when he rejected me, I got vindictive. And they believed him? Maya's laugh was bitter. Why wouldn't they? I'd already lied to them once, right? When I said you were wrong about the abuse. If I was lying then, why should they believe me now? Dr. Harrison leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the system's failure crushing down on him. Maya had been trapped in an impossible situation. Lying to protect herself had destroyed her credibility when she finally tried to tell the truth. Where are you living now? I moved out, got my own place, working 2 jobs to pay rent. Mom chose him over me, just like I always knew she would. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of lost time and missed opportunities hanging between them. I'm sorry, Dr. Harrison said finally. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry the system failed you. I'm sorry you had to go through all of this alone. You tried, Maya said. You were the only one who tried. And even though it didn't work out the way we hoped, it mattered. It mattered that someone saw what was happening to me and cared enough to risk everything to help. It wasn't enough. Maybe not, but it was something. And sometimes, when everything else feels hopeless, something is enough to keep you going. Maya stood up, smoothing down her jeans. I just wanted you to know that you weren't wrong about any of it. And I wanted to say thank you even though it's too late for it to matter. It's not too late, Dr. Harrison said. And it does matter. Maya, if you ever need anything, I know, she said, heading for the door. I still have your card. After she left, Dr. Harrison sat alone in his office, staring out the window at the Phoenix skyline. Maya Rodriguez was alive, free, and building a life for herself despite everything that had been done to her. It wasn't the ending he'd hoped for when this had all started, but it was something. He thought about the choices he'd made, the price he'd paid, the system that had failed them both. He thought about the other Mayas out there, trapped in situations where help seemed impossible and escape felt like a fantasy. Dr. Harrison pulled out a legal pad and began writing. If the system was broken, if the safeguards designed to protect vulnerable people were inadequate, then maybe it was time to work on building something better. Maybe it was time to stop working within a system that prioritized procedure over people and start creating alternatives. The first draft of his proposal for a free clinic specializing in trauma victims was rough, incomplete, probably naive in its optimism. But it was a start. And sometimes, as Maya had said, something was enough to keep you going. Outside his window, the sun was setting over Phoenix, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the city, Maya Rodriguez was finishing her shift at work, counting her tips, planning her next steps. She was 18 years old, scarred but not broken, alone but not defeated. The story that had begun with a simple eye exam had ended with both of them changed, marked by their encounter with the darkest aspects of human nature and the inadequacy of systems designed to protect the vulnerable. It was not the ending either of them had wanted, but it was the one they had earned through their choices, their courage, and their refusal to give up on the possibility that things could be better. In the growing darkness, Dr. Harrison continued writing, putting words to a vision of care that extended beyond the boundaries of traditional medicine, beyond the limitations of bureaucracy and law. It was ambitious, probably impossible, certainly naive, but it was something, and sometimes something was enough. What did you think of Dr. Harrison and Maya's story? This case shows us how complex real-life situations can be, where doing the right thing doesn't always lead to the outcome we hope for. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between following the rules and following your conscience? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on these difficult moral dilemmas. If stories like this resonate with you, please hit that like button to help others discover this content. And don't forget to subscribe for more thought-provoking tales that explore the gray areas of human nature. Your support means everything and helps me continue bringing you these powerful stories that matter.